was a Thursday evening in late October, the kind of chilly fall night when the streets of Naperville, Illinois, smelled faintly of wood smoke and damp leaves. Melissa Carter was standing in the front hall of her two-story colonial-style home, smoothing out the lapel of her husband's charcoal suit jacket before their dinner guest arrived. Mark had a habit of throwing his clothes over the chairs, and she, ever the polished hostess, made sure he looked the part. That's when it happened, the faint rustle of paper inside his pocket. She reached in, thinking it might be a crumpled receipt from lunch. It was a receipt, but not from lunch. Hilton Garden Inn, Chicago, Oak Brook, room 406, check-in 1:15 p.m., checkout 4:48 p.m., date 2 days ago, a Tuesday. Melissa's eyes froze on the timestamps. 2 days ago. Mark had told her he was in Joliet at a dealership manager's meeting. She stared at the slip of paper as if it might dissolve in her hands. Her stomach sank. Her first thought wasn't heartbreak, it was humiliation. The doorbell rang. Voices filled the hallway, the Wilsons from across the street carrying a bottle of Pinot Noir. Melissa tucked the receipt into her palm, her pulse thudding against it. By the time Vanessa arrived, her best friend since college, Melissa was smiling that brittle, tight-lipped smile women wear when they've decided their pain will not be witnessed tonight. The Carter's dining room was warm, the table set with autumn candles and a vase of sunflowers. Mark poured wine, cracked jokes, and leaned into conversations like a man without a care in the world. Melissa barely spoke, but when she did, she made sure her eyes never rested on her husband longer than necessary. Vanessa caught it. She always caught it. She leaned over between the salad and the roast chicken. "What's wrong?" she whispered. Melissa shook her head. "Not now." The party ended around 10. The street outside glistened under the street lamps, wet from a brief rain. Melissa waited until the taillights of the last car disappeared before slipping the receipt from her sweater pocket and placing it on the kitchen counter. Mark was upstairs already, brushing his teeth. She stared at the paper, turning it over like it might confess more if she looked long enough. Her phone buzzed, a text from Vanessa. "You look like you'd seen a ghost. Want to talk?" Melissa hesitated, then typed back. "Need you to find something out for me. Do you still have that connection at the Hilton in Oak Brook?" By the next afternoon, Vanessa had answers. "My sister works the front desk on Tuesday," she said over the phone. She saw him, Liz, checked in with some brunette. Younger, shorter skirt, definitely not business. Melissa gripped the phone so hard her knuckles blanched. "You're sure?" "Positive, and I think you should see this." Vanessa texted a grainy screenshot, pulled from the hotel's Instagram feed. It showed the lobby's glass doors, a reflection barely visible, but Melissa knew that jacket. She had bought it for Mark last Christmas. That night, Mark slept soundly beside her. Melissa sat on the closed toilet lid in the darkened bathroom, her bare feet pressed into the cold tile, staring at the tiny blue glow of the hotel's screenshot on her phone. The sting wasn't about losing him, not yet. It was the public humiliation. She thought of the neighbors, the Wilsons, the gossip at the dealership Christmas party. She thought of Ethan, Mark's son from his first marriage. Just last weekend, he had sat at this very kitchen counter, fiddling with his phone, telling her how his dad barely noticed him anymore. She remembered the rawness in his voice when he said, "Sometimes I feel like I don't even exist to him." A thought slithered into her mind, quiet but electric. She didn't need to leave Mark. She just needed to take something from him, something that would burn, and she knew exactly where to start. 2 weeks passed before Melissa made her move. Mark had told her on a Friday morning that he'd be in Indianapolis for a 3-day dealer conference. Melissa knew exactly where he'd be, the Hilton in Oak Brook, or somewhere just like it. By noon, she'd already decided Ethan would spend a weekend at their house. She called him, pretending it was casual. "Hey, Ethan, your dad's away and I hate rattling around this place by myself. You want to come over? Maybe help me with the garage clean out?" There was a pause and then the sound of him clearing his throat. Yeah, sure. I guess I could." Ethan showed up that evening in his beat-up blue Ford Ranger, the muffler growling like an old dog. He was 18 but still had the linky awkwardness of someone who hadn't quite grown into himself. He dumped his overnight bag in the foyer, eyes flicking around like he wasn't sure if he belonged. Melissa made dinner, the spaghetti with homemade marinara, garlic bread still steaming from the oven. The kitchen smelled like warmth, like family. Ethan ate like he hadn't seen a home-cooked meal in weeks. "This is really good," he said, twirling pasta on his fork. "You sound surprised," Melissa teased. "It's just, Dad doesn't really cook. We usually just order pizza." After dinner, they moved to the living room. She put on Good Will Hunting because everyone should see it at least once, and curled up at the far end of the couch. Somewhere halfway through the movie, Ethan started talking. About school. About how his dad rarely showed up for his games. About the girl he liked who didn't seem to notice him. Melissa listened like every word mattered. "You know," she said softly, "you're a lot more thoughtful than your dad gives you credit for." He looked at her, surprised. "I mean it, Ethan. You're a good man. You should hear that more often." The next morning, they tackled the garage, sorting through cardboard boxes full of Mark's old trophies and auto show memorabilia. Melissa accidentally brushed against him when they were maneuvering a heavy box onto the shelf. The touch lingered just a fraction longer than necessary. When they took a break, she handed him a bottle of Coke and leaned against the workbench. "Don't tell your dad," she said with a little smirk, "but I think you're more helpful than he's ever been." That evening, she ordered pizza and opened a bottle of Cabernet for herself. Ethan poured himself a Coke, but he kept glancing at her glass. Melissa caught the look. "You can try a sip if you want. I won't tell." He hesitated, then took the glass. She watched him make a face, then laugh. It was an easy moment. Too easy. By Saturday night, they were back on the couch watching a late-night comedy special. Melissa sat a little closer this time, close enough that her perfume, a faint trace of Chanel chance, settled between them. Somewhere between a joke and a punchline, she let her head drop lightly onto his shoulder. Neither of them moved for a long time. When Mark called later that night, Melissa was in the kitchen, speaking to him like nothing had changed. "Yes, everything's fine here. Garage is clean. Ethan helped me out. We had a nice weekend." Ethan stood in the doorway watching her. When she ended the call, he didn't look away. His eyes lingered on her like he had never really seen her before. Melissa smiled, small and private. It was working. By mid-November, Ethan's visits had become routine. Sometimes he came over when Mark was working late. Sometimes Melissa needed help with yard work or moving furniture. Other times he'd just show up unannounced, leaning in the kitchen doorway with that half-smile like he was testing her reaction. And Melissa never told him to stop. It started small. Text late at night. "Can't sleep, thinking about you. Did you miss me today?" Melissa responded sparingly, enough to keep him hooked, but never enough to give him the full satisfaction. "You should be careful what you say, Ethan. Some things are better kept between us." It only made him chase harder. One Tuesday, Ethan showed up after school uninvited. "I was just in the neighborhood," he said, which was a lie. He lived 20 minutes away. Melissa was making chili in the kitchen, the scent of onions and cumin filling the air. She handed him a spoon to taste. "Not bad," he said, grinning. "You're sweet," she replied, brushing a speck of flour from his cheek with her thumb. The touch lingered. That night, while they were washing dishes, his phone buzzed. Melissa glanced at the screen. "Dad." Ethan silenced the call without answering. "You're not going to pick that up?" she asked. Ethan shrugged. "Don't feel like it." There was something almost defiant in his voice. Melissa smiled to herself. The shift had begun. The following weekend, Mark came home earlier than expected from a supposed trip to Milwaukee. Melissa was in the living room with Ethan, the TV on low. She heard the garage door rumble open, then the heavy thud of Mark's footsteps. Her stomach clenched. "Go," she hissed under her breath. Ethan hesitated. "Now." He slipped out the side door just as Mark stepped into the living room. "Was someone here?" Mark asked, scanning the room. Melissa didn't flinch. "Just Vanessa. she dropped off some things. She could feel the heat of her pulse in her temples until she heard Ethan's truck fade down the street. The close call didn't scare Ethan. It seemed to embolden him. One afternoon, Melissa was showing a 3-bedroom ranch to a young couple on Maple Avenue. When she returned home, Ethan's truck was already in her driveway. He was sitting on the porch steps, hood pulled up against the cold. "You didn't say you were coming," she said. "I don't need an invitation, do I?" The way he said it wasn't a question. Vanessa noticed first. They were having coffee at Riverwalk Cafe, a small place overlooking the DuPage River. Melissa was telling a harmless story about Mark's golf trip when Vanessa leaned in. "You know, Ethan's been hanging around a lot lately. People are starting to notice." Melissa sipped her latte. "He's family." Vanessa gave her a look. "Don't play me, Liz. I know you, and I know trouble when I see it." Melissa smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it. "Some trouble's worth it." The next week, Ethan's text took a sharper turn. "You don't answer fast enough. Are you with him right now? Tell me you're thinking about me." Melissa realized he wasn't just infatuated anymore. He was possessive, and possessiveness could be dangerous. But that was part of the thrill. Late one night, as the first snow of the season began to fall over Naperville, Melissa stood at her bedroom window watching the flakes settle on the streetlights. Her phone buzzed. A picture. Ethan sitting in his truck parked just down the block. "Couldn't sleep," the text read. "I just wanted to see you." Melissa smiled in the dark. The game was almost over, and soon Mark would lose far more than he ever thought possible. The first week of December was bitter cold in Naperville, the kind of air that stung your lungs. Mark had been short-tempered for days, pacing the house like a man who had lost something but couldn't name it. Melissa knew why. Ethan had stopped speaking to him altogether. It started when Mark saw Melissa's scarf balled up on the passenger seat of Ethan's truck in the Shell gas station parking lot. Ethan brushed it off, said he'd help Melissa carry groceries, but Mark's eyes lingered. That was the first hairline crack. One evening, Melissa found Mark standing in the kitchen, holding her phone. "What's Ethan texting you at midnight for?" His voice was low, almost calm. Melissa didn't take the phone back. She just looked him in the eye. "You really want to know?" His jaw clenched. "Tell me." Melissa let the silence stretch until it ached. Then, with a voice as flat as the winter sky, she said, "You wanted her? I wanted him." The words hit like a gunshot. Mark's face strained, his mouth open, but nothing came out. She could see the moment he understood, not just what she had done, but why. "This is sick," he whispered. "No, Mark. This is fair." The next day, Ethan showed up, pale and shaking. "What did you tell him?" "The truth," Melissa said. He sat at the kitchen table, rubbing his hands through his hair. "You don't get it. He's gonna tell people. My mom, my friends, everyone." Melissa poured herself a glass of wine. "He's not going to tell anyone, Ethan. He's too ashamed." But she was wrong. By the weekend, the rumors had started. Whispers at the dealership, stares in the Casey's General Store. The Wilsons stopped waving from across the street. Vanessa came over, arms crossed. "Do you know what people are saying? This isn't revenge anymore. This is a grenade you've pulled the pin on." Melissa leaned back in her chair. "Exactly." Christmas parties came and went without invitations for the Carters. Mark stopped golfing, stopped showing up to dealership events. Ethan, once proud to be his father's son, now refused to see him at all. Melissa heard him yelling on the phone one night, "Don't ever speak to me again." Then the slam of the receiver. She didn't ask who it was. She didn't need to. The final blow came New Year's Eve. Melissa was in the kitchen, alone, opening another bottle of wine as fireworks thumped distantly over the frozen river. The house was quiet. No guests, no music. Just her and the hum of the refrigerator. Her phone lit up. "Ethan." She stared at the name for a long moment before answering. "Hey," he said. voice unsteady. "You shouldn't call me," she replied. "I know, I miss you." Melissa smiled faintly, swirling the deep red wine in her glass. "Happy New Year, Ethan." She hung up before he could answer. In the reflection of the kitchen window, she caught her own smile. Not wide, not gloating, just small and certain. She hadn't gotten her husband back, but she had taken something from him that no one could ever return. Mark would never recover from this, and that was the point. And that was today's Twisted Tale from Wicket Crime Stories, where every story hides a darker truth. If you're hooked, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next chilling case. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done?